today. Sorry, it's only a 5-minute video.
That's
Not much
okay.
happened.
I'm just shocked
Yeah.
that he went forward at all on the long reins. Like I said,
Yeah.
I threw that out there because sometimes it works, that sometimes giving them more support to gain their stability makes movement
Mm.
easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's a lot of extra calorie burning when the balance is poor. They burn twice
Mm.
as much energy to move forward as when the body
Really?
is
Wow.
efficient. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So it becomes really
Yeah.
taxing and tiring. And I think that's part of why we think they're lazy, is because
Mm.
it's it's sort of like, I don't know, watching an old person go for a walk who's no longer efficient.
Yeah.
It's a lot more taxing energetically than it is when you're moving efficiently.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yep. Good. So he's like an old man walking around, isn't he? At the age of 10.
At the age of 10, yeah. And that can happen at any age. It's just like I said, in the domestic environment, we influence the
Mm.
movement so much.
Yeah.
Plus, we
Yeah.
provide food and water. So we sort of take
Mhm.
away the need for movement or the need for them to get good at movement. That's what training is for. So
Yeah. Yeah.
was
And he's never been straight. So this has been going on for 10 years.
he's never been straight?
No.
And so was that an issue with like getting him started under saddle? He couldn't go straight?
Um, well, it was never really addressed. I kind of think back now, thinking he was, I suppose when we first started him, maybe he wasn't as bad. Maybe it's my riding, I don't know. And I only rode him for a year and a half, so it wasn't like we were doing years and years of it. Um, but we never had the lens that you're looking through, I suppose, around keeping them straight. So, for instance, we'd be on the circle, attempting a circle with like a banana shape, as I've listened to
Yes.
your podcast before. So,
Yes.
all of that, all of that going on. We were bananaing around everywhere.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, no, and I took some pretty healthy horses and really lost forward with an Arabian and a warm blood and a thoroughbred by overbending them so much. And it just took away the desire to go forward because they were so dysfunctional and so unstable from all of that
Mm.
seeking the banana midline, sort of
Yeah,
seeking that
yeah,
bend, which at one time I
yeah,
thought was a good thing too.
yeah, exactly. That's what you're told to do. And
Yeah, and it
yeah,
absolutely destroyed the joints of the hind leg, destabilized the pelvis
Mm.
and the back. And so they just didn't want to move. They just lost
Yeah,
forward.
yeah, yeah.
So was this the first session? Let me hit the share the
Yes,
screen.
yeah. Hence it's so bad. You'll see.
And so this was, I mean, I wasn't sure it would work at all. So the fact that he moved forward at all on the long reins is huge
Yeah.
because, and he would have been tougher. I mean, Stitch was sort of full of shenanigans and tricks, but it's like you kind of needed to know what you were doing on the long reins to even see if Pablo could do it.
Yes, yeah. And he still hasn't got it yet, so we still need to practice. And it has been helping. That's why I could only do 5 minutes, like I said, because my daughter who's filming now, she had to pop the phone away and just kind of walk in front of him at the end because he just got a bit confused and he goes backwards more than he goes forwards. You see
Which is
here.
fine.
So yeah. Anyway, we get going eventually, but it's yep, yep.
But the
But and
fact
you
that,
can just see at some stages he's just so confused.
yeah, what's so interesting though is theoretically, and horses make a liar out of me all the time, but theoretically, putting him up against a fence and tapping him from behind with the same whip you're using now should have easily gotten him to go forward. And the fact that you're way behind him
Yeah,
now and sort of using two reins and he's doing it is just it must be that he needs that support in order to go forward. That it's just too tiring
Yeah.
for him to try to straighten himself. And it sort of gives him
Hmm.
almost a little bit of a distraction to fight against you. So it keeps him it keeps him motivated to move a little bit. But yeah, I can see where you might need somebody in front leading him along a little now and again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm surprised you got him to go forward without a helper at all. So what this tells me is if he keeps giving you a tiny bit more sort of willingness to go forward with every session, because even with leading him, he's not that forward. So I go, it can't get any worse.
No,
And
no,
with
exactly. We are literally just standing still sometimes.
Right. So when you're leading, when you don't have the two reins, which is what I call this is a supportive exercise, which means we're guiding the balance as we go. We're helping him
Mhm.
adjust his balance with the resistance of one rein and then the other. And for some horses, well, I should say most often when you make it more specific like that, all horses lose a little bit of forward. So I
Mhm.
like kind of like Stitch. He really slowed down his walk considerably when you put him on the long
Yeah.
reins. That's
Yeah.
normal. They all lose a little bit of forward. And so I was a little, this wasn't my first recommendation for Pablo because he had so little forward to work with. But
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense as much as he struggled with just being led on a lead rope that maybe more guidance would help him actually use less energy because
Yeah.
you're doing some of the work for him. So it may make him more forward because he's not having to do all of that internal sort of adjusting himself. You're
Yeah.
he's kind of bouncing between the long reins and you're helping him shift his weight back and forth.
Yeah. And you'll notice I'm kind of lifting my hands up quite a bit, but what he's doing is he's putting his nose so close to the ground. I'm
Yeah,
a bit cautious he's going to stand on the rope. So I'm
yeah.
like, quick.
No, you're
Yeah.
doing great because if you hadn't had worked through everything you did and really done such a beautiful job with Stitch, this guy would have been a nightmare to try to learn the long reins with. He's,
Yeah. Yeah.
he's not
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah. And we're not, no, and we're not there yet. So it might be, yeah, a few little
Yeah.
shenanigans to come.
So, but you have the idea and you know what you're looking for. But to get Pablo
Hmm.
going on the long reins is just going to be much faster adjustments. Don't pick on yourself too much. Just like
Hmm.
keep the movement going and get the straightness secondarily.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even if you need a helper in front, that's fine. Does he follow that rein?
No.
That's fine.
We're
No,
getting a bit of a tangled mess over here.
you are doing fantastic. You navigated that beautifully. And I would say just go closer, climb down the reins, and drop all that
Yeah.
excess when he gets confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. Look at his little face. He's like, I don't know
I
what
know.
you want, Mum.
Yeah. But he's not worried. It's like even if he makes a
No.
mistake, he's not panicking. He's just sort of slowly tangling himself up, which is always
Yep.
easier if it's slow motion instead of fast and panicky.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have a couple of options. Like if he really starts resisting forward on the long reins, go back to just leading him and walking him. And
Yep.
if he is like this is as much voluntary forward as I see when you're leading him. It's not a lot better, but it's
Mm.
not worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would say if they're sort of equal in his willingness to move forward, you're going to get bigger changes by giving him the support of the long reins. So I would sort of
Yeah,
try to do it that way. And if he just completely shuts down on the long reins, maybe even within one session, take the long reins off, lead him a little bit, maybe put him back on the long
yeah,
reins, like maybe kind of mix it up to just
yeah,
like he still has to kind of hit that threshold where he's not driving with the handbrake half up, you know? He's
yeah, yeah,
he's just got to take the
yeah,
handbrake off and find first gear. But
yeah,
but
yeah.
this
And
is,
he,
sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, and he's really not stimulated by the whip. Not that I whip him, obviously, but even like trying to make a noise with the whip doesn't really phase him. He's like, oh,
Yeah,
don't need to go forward.
whatevs. Yeah.
Whereas some horses, you bring out the whip and they're like, quick.
Yeah.
So, yeah, unfortunately, that doesn't happen with him.
No, and that was kind of the surprise, even with the hand walking exercise up against the rail. If a pretty firm tap with the whip doesn't motivate forward, you have a much bigger problem.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of whipping them harder. It's a matter of
No.
figuring out where do they need the support to start to have the desire to go forward again. Because
Hmm.
losing the desire to go forward in a horse, like I said earlier, it's a much bigger deal than people realize. I go, everything about a horse is designed for motion. And yes, we provide food and water, so we take away that motivation, that survival motivation for movement. But the body is still designed to survive through motion, like a nomad.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
when they lose the desire to go forward, it's really speaking to a level of instability or a level of discomfort that's quite significant. And beating them
Hmm.
into forward doesn't make them feel any better or feel more stable. So I don't see the point.
Yeah.
I go, I'll give them
Yeah.
one firm crack. And if that doesn't sort of, just let them know I'm serious, um, if that doesn't work, it's a much bigger
Yeah.
issue. It's not a matter of
Yeah.
obedience at all.
No, he's trying to say something. Yeah. And
Hmm.
this is him on one tablet of what's it called?
Oh yeah,
Prevaquan? You call
the
it something else.
Previcox.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yep. So he's on one tablet a day, which has obviously helped because remember when we
Yeah,
first started, he literally couldn't even do one lap of the
yeah.
arena, walking,
No,
hand
I
walking. It was too
yes.
much.
So your vet has you on a 2-week course and then a break?
No, well, he's just given me the bottle and that had 60 tablets, so I'm just carrying
Excellent.
on. I don't know. Yeah.
Excellent. I've had horses in rehab on it for a year or two.
Yeah. Well, I think for how,
Mm.
obviously, I don't know, it's a balancing act, isn't it? I don't know what the repercussions of long-term use is, but he's so, I don't want to say broken, but he's so bad at the moment. He obviously needs something because hand walking around once around the arena, you wouldn't think is a big deal, but he couldn't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. And if you noticed more willingness to go forward on the Previcox, then definitely keep that on his menu. And
Yeah.
did your vet pull blood prior to the dosing?
No,
Okay,
no.
that's all right. The only thing, like one of the benefits, and that's why they labeled it for horses as Equiox. Previcox is just the dog version of the same medicine. Um,
Mhm.
but the reason it became really popular is because it doesn't have um the sort of what do I want to say? It's not as harsh on their stomach and digestive system as like buterbanamine. It
Okay.
it's
Yep.
a much better long-term pain management medication. And
Right. Okay. Yep.
the only side effects to look for would be kidney values or liver values changing.
Hmm. Yep.
So maybe after 6 months, if you pull blood and his blood work is good, you're good to go. And I've had horses on it, where the blood work was fine and they were on it for 2 years. And so it has
Yeah.
the least amount of side effects. It's very gentle on their stomach and digestion compared to the other NSAIDs. So it's a pretty safe one for long term, and I use it a lot in rehab just to make things easier.
Okay.
And to me, it's less invasive than injecting joints or doing steroid injections or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And we
So
wouldn't know where to start. It's like he'd need to be injected all over his body, wouldn't he? Because
I know.
who knows who knows where it is.
Yeah. Yeah, but if
Well, he
he
did have,
looks more comfortable when he's moving, he doesn't look, there's just a hint when he is moving of looking less labored with every step. He's starting to look a
yeah,
bit more organized, like just there.
yeah,
He looks like a normal horse for just, about
yeah,
10 or
just for a
15
second.
strides. Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
okay, he's challenged. But before those 10 or 15 strides, there was a lot more like a laboredness where it looks like literally the weight is sort of shifting leg to leg, like with a
Yes.
delay. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And
Yep.
now
Yep. Yep.
his movement is sort of flowing leg to leg. There's a nice rhythm to the walk when he's walking, which is a huge
Mm-hmm.
improvement from what we first looked at.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah,
just a
definitely. And it
matter
was even
now.
better.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it was even better when we actually went the other way and my daughter was walking in front, so we couldn't film it. But I think we went for 5 or 10 minutes, and he was actually going. He was quite forward.
Good.
So yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, so if you need to start, basically the training wheels, the way you could tag team him, which may be the way to do it, is with you behind on the long reins, guiding his balance, and someone up front, even on a lead line, is fine,
Mm.
leading him
Hmm.
forward. Once he can start to walk for a solid, because even with a leading up in front, he still stops and shuts down.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you kind of know that feeling when he's like, I'm just not going to move. And
Hmm.
so I would use a person leading him while you're on the long reins, and you'll get a little bit better connection, a little bit better feel if you have someone else getting him to go forward. And
Hmm.
I would maybe do that until he can walk with that, sort of dual amount of help for about 10 minutes without stopping.
Yeah.
And if you have to work with him, if you
Yeah.
don't have a person to lead him, do the best you can. And
Yeah.
you can
Yeah. Which is
alternate.
often the case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can alternate between leading him around for a while and then putting him on the long reins. And you can go back and forth in one session, kind of
Yep.
alternating those two strategies if you're by yourself. But whenever you
Hmm.
do have a helper who could kind of lead him, that would give you the opportunity to be like you are with Stitch, a little more refined on the feel of the reins. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that that refinement on the long reins is what is helping him the most stabilize where he should be stable without having to spend as much energy as when he's just figuring it out for himself.
Yeah. 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 So
But this is
we're off
exciting.
to a little start.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was really disappointed the other day. Well, it's not his fault, obviously, but when he hurt himself, and I thought, oh no, we're never going to get there. So anyway, but this has given me one little glimmer of hope again.
Yeah, because you said he was lame for about a week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he yeah was hobbling along. He obviously just was running around the paddock or something and has done something to himself.
And
It had rained.
was that after body work you said, or
Yeah, yeah,
so he
after body work, and then it rained, so then he was running around like a hoon. I say like a hoon, a little. He play fights with the other gelding we've got in the paddock quite heavily, as in he rears up all the time at him, wants to fight.
So how often do you typically have the body worker come and work with him?
Normally about a month,
Okay,
once a month.
why don't you stretch that out for now?
Yep.
Because I'm a big believer in body work. I support it 100%. But with what we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at with Pablo just at this stage is what he's battling with is instability. And
Mm-hmm.
and so when you do body work and you loosen up tight muscles, his tightness right now is all that's kind of holding him together.
Yeah,
And so
that's what I thought.
I would let him be tight and maybe just schedule your body worker at 3-month intervals until he's
Mm-hmm.
more keen to move forward. And that way
Yeah, okay.
you have your body worker to check in with, which I think is very important because she knows him. But because of what he did, he's going to start feeling better and he's going to start having more energy. And then if the body work sort of loosens him up and makes him feel that much better, he can keep doing himself in like that, just overdoing it.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
so
that's what I
even
thought might have happened.
I think because he's on the Previcox and because he can work on the long reins, I would just stretch out your body work sessions right now, no more than once every 3 months until
Mm-hmm.
he's a little bit more consistently moving forward. And
Yeah.
then once he's moving forward, I don't see any reason why you do your monthly body working sessions if you wanted to. But I think while he's
Mhm.
gaining this coordination and initial muscle strength in his core muscles, he's going to take care of some of his tension anyways by shifting which muscles he's using. So he won't be
Yeah.
as tight, and you've got him on pain meds. So I would say just stretch out the body work for now until
Mm. Yeah.
until he shows more inclination to walk. But I
Yeah.
think,
Okay, that's a good idea.
yeah, like once every 3 months would be a good check-in because you won't be, if something's wrong, it won't be wrong for too long, and the body worker can help.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not
Mm-hmm.
wrong, then your body worker should be able to help you gauge his progress, even if he's not very forward yet. She'll be able to tell, or he'll
Mm-hmm.
be able to tell kind of what's going on through the hands-on stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and that can be really encouraging. And then once he's more forward and he starts changing faster, like Stitch is at a place where he's finally starting to change his body faster and faster. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
the body work can be very supportive and very helpful.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And if he
That's good.
were, if he could be led around and he didn't stop all the time, I wouldn't say that. But the fact that he's still struggling with
Mm.
forward and he did himself in, I would say just
Mm.
put that on the back burner for just
Yeah.
more time in between.
Yeah. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If they're if they're holding their body in such a way, because that's the only way they can cope, I suppose. And then some of the tension gets released, they kind of would fall apart a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's when they're more prone to
Mm.
injury because they're not
Mm.
stable in the right areas of the body, which is why you get all that excessive tension in the areas of the body that shouldn't have excessive tension. And so if we just
Yeah.
go in and manually release that tension, we've left them in an unstable state. They might feel really good, no question about that, right? They feel really good, but then they run around with this body that's a little like a toddler state and
Yeah.
they wipe out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so as
Yeah.
he will offer you more forward when he feels stable down the midline of his body. He doesn't even have to be engaged very much. It's really just
Mhm.
stabilizing the spine from the skull to the tail. And that
Mhm.
is what's going to change the use of the legs, as well as how every joint is used and what muscles are doing most of the work. And he's weak in the core muscles. And so you have this transitional period where he still has to stabilize with the outer muscles. And he still puts his legs in the wrong place because that
Mm.
midline, that whole spine and pelvis are sort of a work in progress. But the more he
Yeah.
develops that core strength, and that's why I'm super happy to see that he could do anything on the long reins. Like I would not have
Yeah.
been surprised if it was just an epic fail from start to finish.
Was
But the
pleasantly surprised.
but the long reins really help refine those little weight shifts left to right. So that's
Mm.
how it assists the horse with keeping that constant straight alignment of the spine and reducing all the little lateral bends, which makes
Yeah.
him actually use the muscles that do keep the spine stable. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
as those core muscles along the spine get stronger, he will willingly offer you more forward, and he will not be as chronically tight in the same spots he used to be tight in.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. And it's going to take a while to get good on the long reins, but the fact that he can do them at all is super encouraging. Like, I just think this is wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Fingers crossed we can progress from here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Because, like,
I do worry about him. He's such a, I've just, I don't know, I've been around in so many circles with his horse. So it'd be nice to,
well,
you know,
part of it is
hopefully
that
make some progress one day.
you know what they say about Appaloosas, right? That every spot represents an opinion.
That the Indians rode them to war. Oh yeah, yeah, he's got loads of those. And the other one, isn't it, that the Red Indians chose them to ride them to war, so that by the time they got there, they were so angry with the horse, they were ready to
Yeah.
fight.
Yes. So, the reason they have that reputation is because they are wicked smart horses, wicked
Yeah,
smart. And
yeah, he's very smart.
also all horses that sort of become unstable or uncomfortable in forward motion, they get even
Mm,
smarter because they have to think their way into defensive strategies or avoiding
mm,
things or dealing with things because they're not
yeah,
comfortable in motion. They're never going to panic. They're going to plot. They're going to
yes, yeah,
think
yeah,
their
he's
way
a
through it.
plotter.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
so what
yeah.
you'll
But something I've
see,
noticed since I've,
go ahead.
yeah, oh, sorry, you go. Oh, I
Uh,
was just going to say something I've noticed since I've been doing this work. So I've been working with him, I think from like this, sorry, well, attempting to work with him. Like we've been working together, I think since about February, have we? Something like that.
mhm.
Anyway, he's what I have noticed is when he stands there, his back legs are now a lot more square, whereas previously they would literally be touching, his feet would be touching how he stood. So he has got a wider stance,
Oh,
and
good.
his front the gap between his front legs at the top has definitely increased rather than being
That's
so narrow.
that's very interesting, and it kind of could explain his resistance to forward. Because that sort of, I think we talked about it on his lunging video, his unstable midline and sort of a very stiff hind legs. And what you're
Mm,
describing with that sort of base narrow, plus
mhm.
if his previous training involved a lot of sort of trying to bend the midline like a banana, then all of those things combined can actually create a lot of pain in the sacroiliac joint, which is
Right.
a
Okay.
very and some people like they inject it here, which I don't agree with because the sacroiliac joint is really just two bones that slide on each other. It's not even like a ball and
Yeah.
socket joint. It's just a gliding joint.
Right. Yeah.
And it's surrounded by so much fascia and super strong ligaments. I don't see how you can inject it, but I would watch that as his hind leg stance becomes wider, that should correlate with more comfort going forward. But that would
And
kind
where,
of explain his lack of, when I say discomfort, I have no idea where in the body, but sacroiliac pain
mm,
is significant enough that they don't want to move.
yeah. Where is it located? Is it kind of where the hips are?
So can you see my little cursor arrow where I'm pointing on the screen?
No. Move it
Um,
around a little bit.
hang on, let me go back. Let me go to a
No, sorry, I
side
can't
view.
see it. Oh,
Okay,
there.
there. Can you see
Yes, I
it?
can see it now.
Okay. So right where
Yeah.
the arrow
Yep.
is, what we call the top of it's not really the croup. It's technically the tuber sacrale, which is the wings of the pelvis where they come
Right.
together. That's right
Yep.
here, right?
Yep.
And then back here, you basically have the horse's seat bones. So the pelvis
Hmm.
runs from here to here, right? The one
Yep.
wing of the
Yep.
pelvis. So the sacroiliac is where the sacrum, which is behind that, where the bony part of the top of the hindquarters is. That's the two bones of the pelvis. And
Yep.
underneath that is the sacrum, the
Okay.
sacral part of the spine. So the wings of the pelvis sit like this, and I need a third hand, but the sacrum sits in this way between the wings.
Right.
Does that make
Right.
sense?
Okay. Yep.
So where it sort of joins is deep, like we're talking
Yeah.
a needle like that,
Right
right?
in the middle of his back
Deep.
end, really.
It's anywhere from 6 to 8 inches into the hindquarters
Right.
from the skin, but it's
Yep.
basically in this area. So,
Mm,
right, there's the wings of the pelvis up here where we can see those pointy knobby bones. And then the
yep.
sacrum goes from that point about midway down the hindquarter, and then the coccyx starts about there and all the way down the tailbones. So the
Yep.
sacrum,
Yep.
right? So the sacroiliac joint is deep in that muscle, but it's where
Yeah.
what's interesting about it and why they lose forward is because the backwards thrust of the hind legs is what generates the forward force of motion, right? And
Mm,
that force of motion goes basically right through that sacral, that from the ilium and the sacral joint through the spine. And then the forces
right.
are managed through the back muscles and the use of the spine. And so horses that have pain in the sacroiliac joint or SI joint, eh, they either blow up bad or they just refuse to go forward. So,
Yeah. Okay.
and what you're talking
Interesting.
about with that very narrow sort of hoof touching together, that's very stressful on the SI joint specifically.
Yeah. Okay.
And so if he's
Yeah.
getting a wider stance between the hind
Mm,
legs, then he's
mm,
working
mm,
through that issue. And I would say the equiox or the previcox is probably making him comfortable enough that you're going to get a lot more changes back to a healthy use than what he
mm.
could do without the pain management.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a very interesting joint. And when people say they can adjust it or inject it, I go, how?
Mm. Wow. How are you going to get to it?
How? Not only how are
Yeah.
you going to get to it, but how would you adjust a joint that just literally does this? It just glides,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's basically two different types of cartilage meeting each other. And technically, it's called a joint because it's two bones meeting, but there's no way. I guess you could
Oh,
subluxate it a little bit, but it's still going to just throw out more cartilage.
yeah.
So I don't
Okay.
see how you could really adjust it.
Hmm.
So the
Is that a
horse,
joint that they get? Is that a joint that they get arthritis in then, or not necessarily?
you can get arthritis anywhere. So,
Right. Okay.
so what arthritis comes from is basically what's called that shearing force. So
Yeah.
if the SI joint isn't sliding correctly and correctly lined up, then the body
Hmm.
starts to throw out more cartilage to stabilize the joint. And if that goes
Yeah.
on long enough, it creates bony changes to stabilize the joint. And that's what arthritis
Yeah.
is, no matter where it
Okay.
is in the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he has arthritis, but his lack of desire to go forward is so extreme that when you mentioned how
Mm.
his stance used to be the hind feet almost touching together, or like
Yeah.
some horses will stand with a hind leg across the midline,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of resting
Actually, do you know
on
what?
the side.
You know what Stitch used to do? I haven't seen him do it for a while. He'll actually cross his back legs.
Yeah, so that can also be indicative of sacroiliac um, pain
Right.
issues. Because they're
Yeah. Okay.
basically,
Yeah.
that's kind of how they give themselves relief when it's not functioning
Yeah.
correctly, is it
Hmm.
keeps bringing the hind legs in narrower, or they'll kind of cross the hind legs. Sometimes that can be
Yeah.
a lumbar issue or a sacral issue. It's just one of those
Hmm.
kind of classic symptoms of
Yeah.
sacroiliac pain.
Yeah.
So, but if he's getting wider and he's getting more forward, I would say definitely, keep him on the Previcox. And then once he willingly maintains a walk for 10 minutes, you could have another look at it.
Mm. Yep. Yep.
But all
Sounds
of this
good.
work you're doing, and that's exactly sort of the reason I learned and not to call them lazy or stubborn. I go, they have a reason,
Mm.
and I got to
Yeah.
figure out how to get them comfortable enough to rebuild the capacity for forward. Because they're
Yeah.
telling
Yeah.
me, I don't want to, I don't have the capacity.
Yeah. And perhaps because of Pablo and his lovely personality, maybe it's that he tells me sooner than another horse would. You know, maybe another horse would perhaps suck it up a bit and try to
Yes,
carry on, whereas he's like, no, I'm not doing that, thank you.
yes.
Which is
No,
fine, you know, it's what it is, isn't it?
no, and I basically divide all horses into two categories, essentially. You have your horse that is so bonded with people or their person that they do the best they can despite pain. And that's how our best horse goes lame with,
Yes.
and then there's other horses, which is where I specialize, that they're having none of it. And long
Yeah.
before they would go lame, they're letting the whole world know that something is
Yeah.
not okay.
Well,
And
that's Pablo and Stitch. I've got two of those.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's my whole barn. And right now, that horse rarely wrong. That was sort of, she's a thoroughbred chestnut mare. And so
Yeah.
people just go, oh, well, she's just a thoroughbred chestnut mare. Of course, she's going to be that way. And I go, no, she's actually telling us there's something
Yeah.
not right. And it turned out in her
Hmm.
case, she's riddled with arthritis down her spine. It's called spinal stenosis.
Oh,
And so, yeah, it was a very
whoa.
big deal. And I go, no wonder, she didn't want to lift her back. No wonder she was blowing up with riders.
Yeah.
And when you put,
Yeah.
people were putting a running martingale on her and more leveraged
Oh,
bits and taking her out, and she just got really good.
kind
She got really good at unloading professional riders.
Yeah. Kind of, you can see why though, can't you? You know,
Yeah,
if it's hurting them, they're telling like little softly messages that we're not hearing, and then yeah, until
yeah,
they just say get off. That's
yeah.
enough now.
No, and some horses will just quietly break down. It's not
Mm,
all horses that act out, but the ones that are acting out, every quote unquote difficult horse I have ever worked with across the board had a
mm,
physical reason that they were acting out. And
mm,
a lot of times, once they got into the label of a problem horse,
hmm.
that their issue was not easy to diagnose. They had issues that were,
Yeah.
really either kind of weird or strange or very hard to
Mm,
diagnose. And
yeah.
and so they just got labeled as problem horses or difficult horses because no one really figured out what the physical root cause was.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you find out about the arthritis in the back by an X-ray?
Yeah. hmm
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ugly and actually
Mm.
on the facets, which are on the side of the spine. So any kind
Hmm.
of bending would just send her to the
Oh,
moon.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that treatable or not really? Not
Well,
arthritis is.
they did a course of something called OSFOS. I don't even know if it's legal anymore, but it's like a general anti-inflammatory. It's systemic. It's like a whole body treatment.
Yeah.
Because the other medications weren't strong enough. And that made a difference,
Mm,
but it only lasted about a year. And you really can't
mm.
keep doing multiple treatments.
No, no.
So, in that window of time, the goal was to try to change her balance enough that she wouldn't need a second treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Tricky.
Yeah. And they
Mm,
made
yeah.
headway, but now it's like she's doing pretty well. And I'm
Mm,
hoping to ride her again. She hasn't been ridden in quite a while, but
hmm.
we'll see how she does.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah, thanks. But what do you do with a uh,
Yeah.
chestnut mare named Rarely Wrong? She just cracks me up.
Oh, really wrong.
Yeah. All right, so
Sweet.
let me stop the recording